now, mates, lend an ear.
Hear us now.
Captain Franz at the helm so steer. Gather round the partnership's deck.
Scripts command.
Tales from the leaders of the partnership train. So we chant by the podcast glow. Through veritable seas to boxes flow. Dar die. Hoist the sail.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Partnership. I'm incredibly excited to have my good friend Carl on the show today. Carl has a extensive partnership experience throughout the last decade at companies such as Bertelsmann Group, which is a big German publisher, which actually owns Penguin Random House, which is kind of crazy. Then at Amazon, looking after the Kindle division and partnerships in general, and then most recently as global head of channel sales at Meta. And since leaving Meta, Carl has founded his own company called Exec Functions, where he advises startups on international go-to-market through partners. Thanks for joining us, Carl.
Thanks for having me, Franz. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So first of all, if you're watching this call live, I really appreciate you taking the time. If you have any questions for Carl, there's a lot we can cover, and Carl has such extensive experience that I want to make sure that we bring it the best parts to show in this episode. So if you have any questions, drop them in the comments, and we will discuss them live. But I feel like I didn't do your background justice, Carl. So I wanted you to maybe share briefly as well, like what was your journey into partnerships, and how did you specialize in international expansion through partnerships?
Yeah, happy to share it. So partnerships have been, I think, the connective tissue throughout my career. And that actually started working with this German/worldwide publisher, Bertelsmann. They also run a number of TV stations, predominantly in Europe, but also in India. They also own BMG Music at some point, close partner and joint venture with Sony. So look them up, interesting company. The first sort of partnership role that I had there sort of fell into because I was a product manager, had a small product team, and being solving strategic challenges seemed to be best covered through partnerships. So back then, this TV station was building all of its interactive activities, had already built an online presence, had done some things on mobile, but it turned out in 2007, not many people were using the mobile internet. That was a challenge for mobile network operators too. So the T-Mobiles, Vodafone is large in Europe. That was another partner. They all had mobile internet price plans, but no one was using it. So basically, we came together there and figured, hey, this TV station has content. This TV station has unsold media space, which is really, really, I think, a hint when it comes to promoting your offerings. You don't always have to go and pay for media. You might be able to find partners that can, in the minimum, provide you with that media for a lot cheaper because they haven't sold it anyway. So content and media were the assets that this TV station brought in. And network operators had the price plans, had the operations, and had the need to onboard a lot more users into those price plans. So my first, I suppose, glorious foray into the world of partnerships was making it attractive for Germans to try out the mobile internet, because they would now get soap opera behind the scenes content and the German version of Pop Idol for free on their mobile phone if they chose that price plan that we did together with T-Mobile. And bringing that to scale was the first role there, including like building retail partnerships and building the brands around it and overseeing the advertising and really partnering extremely closely with this mobile operator because they hadn't done that before. So it was a strategic alliance. I'll fast forward a little bit, but I built similar such alliances while I was at Amazon and responsible for Kindles and Kindle accessories. In addition, with bringing network gadgets to those Kindles so people could use their Fire tablet while on the go. That was one thing. Or also launching advertising on those Kindle devices and partnering with companies like Withings and Sennheiser and others, and really like creating ways that you could bundle those Kindles with accessories and then promote those accessories on the Kindle was a fun winning concept. And the other big thing that I got to experience was building a marketplace, right? Like, so the extreme other end of mega scale and getting thousands of companies onto the platform that would operate in that space. Launching that Kindle accessories marketplace in Europe was a really interesting experience. And then I went into Meta and really doubled down on advertising and did direct sales myself for 4 years actually, and leading sales teams. So really had the privilege of understanding how do you run these teams internally, and then how do you amplify the impact of sales teams by bringing on partnerships. And over 5 years had the opportunity of building a reseller organization from scratch as the first employee initially, and then gradually bringing on all of the program managers, partner managers, operations, to bring that reselling organization into 40 countries around the world. Actually became one of the major initiatives to drive growth and drive advertiser satisfaction in these countries. I'm sure we'll have more anecdotes and examples from that world, so I won't spoiler too much, but that was a phenomenal experience for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to unpack here already, but to recap on your Meta experience, like, from what I heard, like you had a team of 30 people at the end, and also a multi-billion-dollar like business unit that you were looking after. So I'm very excited to hear more about that as well. And I think your experience with Meta is also interesting because you were an IC initially and actually doing the job of selling ads, or like selling, to advertisers, and then slowly realized that, you actually had like a bigger opportunity working with partners rather than doing these sales yourself, which is something which I can empathize with, because that is exactly how I fell into partnerships as well. I was an account executive at Hopin, or I initially, was just selling at Hopin. We didn't really have job titles at the time because we were a startup. And then all of a sudden over time, you realize like, hey, partners would be much better suited to sell than myself, because I can't scale myself, but I can scale up partners, especially if you don't have headcount assigned necessarily.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's a beautiful thing and a powerful thing about partnerships, where you can say, hey, these partners can, right? Like, large companies always have like headcount restrictions. You could argue, hey, with partners, we can basically build the proof point of why we should go and do more in this area, because look, this partner has already built a 10-person sales team where we would have only put one person, and look at the impact that drives. Or this partner has invested in marketing, something we had never considered. Look at the impact that drives. And you can really build those proof of concept, proof of value internally quickly with partners. However, you also really got to enable these partners well, because if not, no one is happy, nothing works, and you can't even tell whether that is because it's not the right partner, or whether it's because you haven't enabled them well. But yeah, some of that, and it's sort of closing the loop here, is so similar in terms of the challenges that large enterprises and startups have. And startups, in addition, of course, have much fewer resources than the large enterprises. I really wanted to sort of double down on that experience, bring a lot of those best practices to the startup and scale up world, where companies just don't have the luxury to go through those year-long learning curves. And then at the same time, had mentored enough startups and sat on juries and I don't know what, to know that world was something that the enterprise world also really needs to understand to get like the agility going. So thought, okay, let's combine these two things, and essentially started my own boutique and fractional consulting business called Exec Functions, and have been doing that happily for a year. And like my own learning curve and the experiences, or the many different ways that partnerships can play out, I now have 10 times the set of examples and exposure as I had before. So definitely a lot to unpack there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to understand more, because we wanted to focus the show specifically on global expansion through partnerships, because that's a hot topic. And a lot of people are thinking about this right now as a way to grow in 2025, if maybe their growth stagnated in their core markets. And so I'm curious, like, from your work now consulting with startups, like, what have you seen is the right time to think about global expansion? Like, when is the moment where you actually want to invest into global expansion versus double down on your core markets?
So I think there's two questions embedded in there. The first one is, when do you go global? And question two is, how do you do it? And do you do it with partners, right? And I think that the answer to the first part, when do you go global, is when you have a clear understanding of your own product and why people want it, or your own service, and do you feel like you have strong product market fit in your core market, right? And when you have strong product market fit in your core market, and you understand what are your growth levers, is it predominantly sales, is it predominantly marketing, then two things that you do from there is you come up with a hypothesis of what are the next growth frontiers. Are those other geographies, or are those, for example, other verticals, other industries, maybe in your core market, or are those other client segments, because you have product market fit with small clients, medium-sized clients, now you want to go enterprise, or vice versa. These are right, the geos, the industries, and the segments are three growth dimensions. Each and every one of them could be worth pursuing. You want to stack rank them in terms of where do you have the best signal of which of these are most promising first. Don't do it all at once, right? Pick one. And once you've picked one, there is a chance that partners can help you go international. There's a chance that partners can help you break into other verticals or other client size segments. Again, see if you have any signal that there'll be strategic capabilities that partners can complement you with. And then I would say you are in a good position. You have some strong hypotheses that you can go with, and you can build a plan of how partners could bring that to life, right? And you can always go back to your hypothesis and see, do we now have signal that that was the right hypothesis? Great, let's double down on the execution. Maybe though, we actually need to fine tune at the very basics as well, and figure out, do people in this new area, in this new market, let's pick geographies for simplicity here, is it possible that people need a different version of our product and service, right? And I think there's always three layers there as well, which is go and uncover, do people need your product as is? Do people need maybe some different nuances of how you package and price your product? And do people need a different way of explaining that product and promoting that product? Partners can help with all three, but again, not all at the same time. So form a hypothesis about each layer, I suppose, and figure out what you want to cover in which order.
Yeah. I think you touched on an important point around, should you work with partners? Because one of the things which I always, thought initially when I got into partnerships was like, if you're a giant like Meta or Amazon, you can just, you have unlimited money. So you should be able to just like do everything yourself. So why would you work with partners if you are a giant company? Like, what's the benefit of, working with a partner agency in a new market versus like just setting up your own team over there?
Opportunity costs and focus, right? Say, to pick the Amazon example, Amazon could be in every country in the world at this stage, right? But when it comes to deciding, do I put an entire new operation together in, say, the Netherlands, or do I go and build out a vertical in my core market, right? The DIY vertical. Both of these exist, by the way, now, right? Or the fashion vertical. But some 10, 14 years ago, that was a legitimate sort of trade-off decision. Do I double down on a thing that can make me, if it can make me the same amount of revenue, essentially, right? Starting a new vertical or going into a new market, then I will go with the one that makes me the most revenue, or that makes me the same revenue at a lower cost, right? I have an existing infrastructure, already have all my fulfillment centers in the US. Why not use those to cover more verticals before setting up a whole operation in another market, because that just introduces more points of failure. So right, like that's a reason to hold back on expanding. That's a reason to hold back on, or at least consider very deeply before going into partnership. Maybe partners can actually help efficiently do that, but it doesn't work by itself. To give you the meta example, you could find that you have found a motion that already works extremely well when you're thinking about your own go-to-market and your own sales. You have product market fit. The founder has understood how to sell, has made the couple of first deals themselves. We now have an internal sales team that sells by itself. All of these things have happened for years, right? And we have found out that by putting internal sales teams into more markets, we can expand our footprint, and the model is sort of copy and pasteable with some adjustments, right? Like at that point, Meta had presence in over 30 markets with direct offices itself. So it was a clear confirmation that yes, we can sell better if we're physically there, and if we understand our clients and what they need in this market. We can adapt the core product as we bring it together with that understanding. That is very much, part of the success formula already to open internal new sales teams in these markets. Okay, what do we do next? Well, we can't open 50 more of these sales teams. The next set of markets are probably all similarly sized opportunities. We have similar unknowns. And it's really, at this point, reaching a point of diminishing returns from just standing up more internal sales teams. Well, then let's try partners, right? Because they are essentially following the same logic as we know already works with our internal teams. And we just got to enable them equally well with internal teams. There's a second part of demand signals as well, which is Facebook Meta has a strong self-service platform, right? So we knew that there were another 150 countries in the world where there was already an ecosystem of advertisers and agencies that were using the platform. The demand was there, and we knew that the demand was sort of pent up and had reached a point of, hey, we can't really, like, people are configuring themselves into a corner with our self-service product, which is probably very similar to companies that have like a product-led growth strategy, right? Like where you just put the credit card and sign up to the product. And at some point you find that, no, it's not really a land and expand. It's not really going into those organizations more deeply because you don't have the internal ambassadors and people don't have the talking points. It stays small. All right, then let's put physical people, let's put physical partners that can essentially take our clients by the hand and take them to that next layer of growth. And that was that was so much clear signal that this was sort of destined for success if we did it right. That it was convincing enough to get that operation going. And then it was a low enough risk to essentially put one person to build the thing. And I had some of that background on operations and product from the Amazon and before, and I had the sales experience at Facebook, and I could bring both these things together.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like you answered like another question I had as well, which is how do you decide which markets to enter first? It's going to be the ones where you have the strongest signal from existing customers, right? And so there's a great lesson for PLG companies there that your customers will tell you which markets are a good fit for your product just because they're already starting to sign up, versus just going blindly like Japan has a big GDP, so we should go to Japan. But if you don't have Japanese customers already, it's probably a risky move. It's much less risky to go somewhere where you already have an existing customer base.
I agree. I mean, not everyone has the luxury of having like signal at a significance where you can really tell that it's very likely going to work. It might be that you have interest from 2-3 companies that have somehow stumbled across you or heard about you at an event, and those could be false positive signals as well, right? Like at that point, you actually want to go in and do validation, right, and spend more time with the market to see if it's real. But yes, clear demand signals on your product are much better than just macroeconomic indicators. Another really important one to consider, though, is also risk signals, like what could go wrong. And again, you want to look at the external and at the internal component. Externally, what can go wrong? Well, how easy is it to do business in these markets? How easy is it to set up companies? How readily available are partners that are already there? Are they already set up? How would the operations work, right? Like, do we need to transmit money across borders? What's the stability of those currencies versus the dollar? Like, these things can really end up becoming major headaches. And seen that in reality a couple of times, where suddenly an economy tanks and goes south, and part of the business is happening in dollars and part is happening in local currency. And then how does that change the dynamic with your partners? And your own internal capabilities to handle that type of partners that you need in that market is really important as well, starting from languages, starting from ability to cover time zones, and also the operations that are needed. So I would say, to sum it up, 2x2 matrix, right? Internal, external, opportunity, and risk. And as you map that out, you might find that what you initially thought was the most attractive market is actually somewhere in the top 5 to 10 and not on your highest list anymore. And you have more obvious choices where you can learn faster.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love a good 2x2 matrix.
That's what you need consultants for, right?
Yeah. If you read the book, you realize in the book on partnerships, it's just all 2x2 matrices. Like every problem can be solved by a good 2x2. But I wanted to switch gears again, because there's one part of your experience which I definitely want to learn more about, and that is just how to build out a team. Because you build a team from like one person yourself in the beginning to like 30 people at some point as well. And very few people in partnerships actually have had that experience, because not a lot of companies can support a partnerships team of 30 people. So I'm curious, like, when you build out that team, like, how did you structure it? What was your thought process on like how to manage 40 different markets through partners?
So it was all very slow and gradual, right? Including the number of markets. We started with
That's
4
already a
markets,
good lesson. Go slow
became
and
7,
gradual.
13, 20. Right? Okay, from 20 we went to 40 because we had at that point 2.5, 3 years of experience under our belt on how to manage a partner organization. It was time to really accelerate it, and that's one of the big promises of partnerships as well, right? Like, it can grow exponentially, while your own internal business can, for the most part, just grow linearly, right? You want double the amount of customers.
Yeah.
Well, you get to double the amount of salespeople, you get to double the amount of people in the accounting department, right? Probably more than double, because the next set of markets are going to be harder to convert. So diminishing/declining returns if you only do internal. Partners, once you figured it out, can really grow exponentially. And that's right, like, it's not an accident that companies like Oracle or SAP or Microsoft are making the majority of their business through partnerships. But so how do you grow that team in a world where you're still trying to find partner product market fit, which we did during the first years, where you're still gradually rolling out geographically, where you do it gradually internally as well, while constantly creating those proof points internally of what the next level of your organization and of your partner operation should look like. And you leverage the partners to essentially prove that out. So make it very concrete. my work initially was to find partners and select the right partners, and these were strategic resellers, right? So I actually I built a partner selection process, an RFP process, which in many ways is the industry standard now in the advertising reseller space, that you run these selection processes. You want partners that really, sell like your sales team would, that fit very well. So it's actually started with a couple of principles and hypotheses, which is, hey, partners can grow exponentially if they become the same kind of trusted advisors to our clients as are our own sales teams. That was principle one. Principle two is these partners will only succeed if we enable them as well as our internal sales teams. And principle three was we got to hold them to the same high standard as we hold our own teams. And everything else followed from there. Basically, you can then use these principles and figure out what are gaps, from that target state compared to your current state. And the first gap was education and enablement. Really needed to get those partners to a level that they were as well informed about the product as our internal teams. So the first proof point was something that was very manually put together, where I essentially leveraged my own knowledge of sales and brought together a lot of colleagues from the sales teams to set up awesome partner boot camps. Once we saw the effect and could prove how much better these partners could sell once they've gone through the boot camps, I could argue, hey, we need an education person on the team. Brought someone in who could do that job better than me and was more experienced. And she did an incredible job building a repeatable partner academy. And it grew from there. Number two was we need partners to be much more automatically informed about opportunities and risks. We need partner management software. So again, build that out somewhat manually with sticks and stones and Excel sheets first, saw the proof points of that. And then, got some internal resources, both on the team and off the team, that could commit to that. And then did a similar thing with marketing, and basically constantly building out those proof points of, hey, look, this thing actually works. And really tried to leverage the capabilities and the capacities that the partners had as well. So whenever we put one resource, we encourage the partners to put like 5 resources, so that essentially the efforts and investments on our end would fall on super fertile soil, because there were now education people in the partners who could amplify these efforts. There were now technical people who could help implement the partner management software that we built. There were marketing people who could go and take what we had, build and localize it, things like that.
Yeah. It's really refreshing to hear that even at a large company like Meta, for example, you're still applying the crawl, walk, run approach. There's no shortcut.
100%.
Like, just because you have that scale, just because you have that brand, just because you have like a large amount of resources, doesn't mean you can cut corners. It doesn't mean that you can just go like, oh, we have like 2 partners, we should install this like multi-million-dollar PRM now. Like, no, you're gonna.
There's actually a massive risk from doing that.
Yeah.
As well. I've like, not naming particular companies or organizations or business, but I have seen examples of over-resourcing partnership programs and just sort of firing everything you've got at the thing. And then you suddenly have 40 internal stakeholders who are all plugging away, doing all sorts of different things for the partners, and coordinating that just becomes such a challenge. And you start inundating the partners with all sorts of materials and pulling them in all sorts of different directions. And you have no way of knowing which of these things are going to be driving impact or not. You can't isolate the effect anymore. And you probably overwhelm your partners, and they're not even going to use these resources in the way that you envisioned. So the slow and gradual approach is super, super important. I think the understanding that the scarcest resource is time, not just for your organization, but for your partners as well. And what is the best use of a given hour that somebody's got, right?
Yeah.
And really solving for that, I think was a big lesson that I continue to hold as one of the highest principles to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to give a quick shout out to Stuart, who's joining us live. And Stuart shared that partners allow you to eliminate the financial burden and risk of scaling, which is 100% accurate. Like you're removing a lot of the financial risk and a lot of the, headcount risk and so forth, operational risk by working with partners. But one thing which you also do is you add on other risks, right? Like partners might go rogue. You don't have as much control over them as over your own teams, right? And so I think one thing which I take away from our call today, Carla, is that education is incredibly important, especially if you have a brand like a Meta or an Amazon, because you're representing that brand as a partner, which means you need to, have a very, very high quality bar. And that is something which a lot of startups, I guess, like cut corners with because they don't spend as much time on educating their partners. They might not have that high quality bar, but that's really where a lot of, partnerships can go wrong if you don't have partners in the market who are well educated and can represent you the way you want to be represented.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's super important for anyone who is looking to establish a brand and a business successfully for the long term. Brand can sometimes be an afterthought if you don't come from that world, but ultimately it's what differentiates you from your competitors, right? And if you have a diluted, not well-established brand because you haven't enabled your partners to represent it, it's a great way to set yourself up for failure. And I agree with Stuart's comment here that there is a whole lot of risk that partners can take away from you, right? And people often underappreciate that and are just looking at the revenue equation and wondering could there be more? But also, right, like you don't have to put an office, you don't have to hire a team, you don't have to deal with all of the local regulations and requirements. That is an extremely big benefit that is hard to quantify sometimes. So if you're messaging internally, it's so important to also tell the story of that internally and manage the expectations well. And you ultimately have, whenever you connect with partners, you are also an ambassador of that partnership into your own organization. And the same thing is happening on the partners side. So definitely important to get that right and to see it as a long-term potential to amplify everything that your organization has, but you gotta invest in the right way to essentially be able to harvest that potential.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. I know we're at time and I don't want to take up more of your day, Carl. So before we head out, do you have one key takeaway when it comes to, either scaling partnerships or global expansion improved partnerships that you think corporates do really well and like a lot of startups overlook and our audience should take with them from this call?
I think a big takeaway is if you think about your business in decades, not in years or months, right? You already give yourself the luxury to do things a little bit more strategically and systematically, and you give yourself the space to do crawl, walk, run, right? You want to learn from each of these experiences, which is really much more valuable than making a quick extra dollar, right? That is often the best way to get disappointed if you hope you just turn on partnerships, set and forget, and it's just gonna be the silver bullet to make money in areas, markets that you don't yet understand well. Don't do that. At the same time, there is so much to be gained and understood in enterprises also from the startup world, which is this mental agility, this need to constantly understand, are we spending our time on the right things, and is our invested now actually paying off well? So instead of standing up a massive operation and just letting that run on the side, to constantly question, is this doing for us what we wanted it to do, and what have we just learned that is now informing the next steps, and staying extremely scrappy about that. I think is super important to, feel confident about, having that mindset as a startup and holding on to that even as you scale.
Yeah, 100%. It's so easy to forget the, decade-long vision when you're like chasing a number every quarter or every month as a startup. So it's important to stay on top of that.
You are successful as a startup in your core market because you spend essentially all of the sweat equity with your clients and figuring out what works for them and how is your product helping them solve problems. So just, staying in the mindset of, hey, we got to go through a similar discovery process in these new geos that we're entering. And there might be slightly different like nuances of those needs. So let's rediscover. And this time we're rediscovering it together with partners, right? So you basically are signing up for a new adventure as we're doing that, right? Payment flows potentially totally different, right? Like Paraguay, invoices needed to be delivered by hand to clients. So we had like our partners hired scooter couriers that went around with the invoices, manually delivered them. Something you would have never expected. And like being ready for these kinds of discoveries and being able to tweak your operations and learning together with the partners to figure out how to make the most of that. If you constantly stay in that mindset, I think partners will do phenomenal things for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I never thought that people would still deliver invoices by hand, but that's a great story. Awesome. I don't want to take more of your time, Carl. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I also want to give a shout out to Stuart and Arthur, who actively commented in the chat, and to everybody else who spent, this half an hour with us live today. If you want to learn more about channel sales in general, tune in 2 weeks again, because we will have Hans-Peter Beck on, the author of Building Successful Channel Partnerships in the Software Industry, which is one of my favorite partnerships books. I reference it in the book on partnerships like multiple times because it's just such an eye-opening read about everything channel sales. So I'm very excited about that episode as well. And with that, thanks everybody. Thanks Joshua. Thanks Arthur. Thanks Stuart. Thanks Carl. And I'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Franz.
Hark now, mates, lend an ear.
Hear us now.
Captain Franz at the helm, so steer. Gather round the partnership's deck.
Scripts command.
Tales from the leaders of the partnership train. So we chant by the podcast glow. Through wearable seats to boxes flow. Dar, oh, die. Hoist the sail.